Assalamu alaikum. This is lecture 15 of Pakistan Studies. The title is The Problems of Setting Up a New State. In our previous lectures, we have discussed in detail the movement of the Muslims of British India for the establishment of Pakistan. And Pakistan came into existence in 1947. The attainment of independence brought an end to a long struggle. However, this also marked the beginning of a new phase for the Muslims who were striving for setting up the new state. Now that state had to be created. Those promises, those commitments had to be translated into reality. Pakistan came into existence under very difficult and unfavorable circumstances. Not many states began their life in such a difficult situation. That was the reason that some pessimists at that time were saying that this new state will not be able to cope with the problems and pressures it is bound to face in setting up the administrative system and dealing with the problems of political management and governance. In this lecture, we are going to discuss some of the problems and the issues the new state faced in the beginning, in the early years of independence, and in what manner the state was able to deal with those issues and those problems. In this connection, we will be talking about several things. First, we'll talk about the setting up of new administration, how the new administration of Pakistan was set up. Second, distribution of assets of British India between independent Pakistan and independent India. That was the second issue the new state of Pakistan had to deal with. Third, we'll talk about the integration of the princely states into Pakistan. There were over 560 princely states, and some of those states joined Pakistan. So what was that issue, and how was that issue dealt with? It is in this context that we will talk about the origin of the Kashmir dispute. The fourth issue that was faced by Pakistan in the early years was the issue of communal rights, killings that went on at the time of independence, and the refugee problem that created a lot of pressure, economic pressures and social pressures on the new state. Lastly, we'll talk about the canal water issue and also trade issues that adversely affected Pakistan-India relations in the early years of independence. Let's now take up the first issue or first problem, that is the setting up of new administration for the state of Pakistan. Karachi was declared the capital of Pakistan, and the federal government was to be set up there. It was a challenging task, a difficult task, mainly because of scarcity of resources, of material needed to set up a governmental system, as well as an acute shortage of senior civil servants, trained and experienced people who were to run the administration. The problem was so serious that the federal government, which was being set up in Karachi, didn't really have the stationery, didn't really have the required office material to run the administration. And initially, the orders were often written by hand because there was shortage of typewriters, and many officers used to take their chair and table out of room and sit under tree, do the work, and then put that chair and table back into the room because everybody could not sit inside. There was a space problem. But the serious problem was that of trained manpower. And a large number of civil servants who were there came from India. They came to Pakistan gradually over a period of time, and some of them were not sure whether their families will be reaching Pakistan or not. So it was very uncertain kind of situation. There was another administrative problem. How to establish connection between the new central government or the federal government that was now sitting in Karachi with all limited resources and the provincial governments in all the provinces. Because previously the central government was sitting in Delhi, that is the government of British India. Now all those provinces and system had to be shifted to Karachi, where now the federal government of Pakistan or the central government of Pakistan was sitting. Another dimension of setting up of new administration was the army organization. Army headquarters had to be set up, and this was done gradually. Army headquarter was set up in Rawalpindi, which was the office or core office of the northern units of the British Indian Army. Then the most important issue was to set up a provincial government in Dhaka for East Bengal or East Pakistan. In United India, Bengal government was in Calcutta, and what became East Bengal or East Pakistan was relatively backward regions of United Bengal. And in Dhaka, new administration had to be set up, and there was a problem of finding qualified, experienced officers, problem of space, problem of all other things, the kind of problems which were faced in Karachi. Because in Dhaka there was no provincial government before that, whereas in case of say Punjab province, in case of frontier province, in case of Sindh province, administration already existed. In Dhaka, There was no administration. So this was very important to set up an administration, because unless there is an administration, how could you run the state? And here Pakistan was facing more problems. One solution which Pakistan adopted at that time to deal with the problem of administration was that it retained a number of British civil servants. British officers were retained. India also did the same thing. India also retained some British officers. Pakistan also did the same thing. But in case of Pakistan, there were more officers for a longer period of time. And in this way, they were able to set up a new administration for the new state of Pakistan, which dealt with difficult problems with dedication and commitment. Otherwise, the conditions were very discouraging. However, nationalism that was very strong and commitment to the ideals was there. Therefore, they were able to face the difficult situation of the early years of independence. Second major issue which the state of Pakistan had to face was the question of division of the assets of United India, that is the British India, because British India was succeeded by two states, independent India, independent Pakistan. And these assets were the assets, property of civil administration, then financial assets, and the military. On paper, it was easy to make divisions. It was easy to say how much financial assets would go to Pakistan, how much to India. The problem was in translating those decisions into reality. And in this connection, the Indian government was not really forthcoming and cooperative so far as record, equipment, or funds or resources, financial resources was concerned. For financial resources, the share was divided between India and Pakistan. Pakistan got one installation of rupees 200 million. Then Indian government was not willing to transfer any more funds. However, in the beginning of 1948, on Gandhi's insistence, the Indian government agreed to release some amount. However, later on, nothing came. And Pakistani estimates are that not less than 50 million rupees were not transferred to Pakistan, because after January 48, nothing was really transferred to Pakistan. This became a kind of pressure, economic pressure on Pakistan. Pakistan asked the Indian government for equitable share as agreed to be transferred to Pakistan, but Indian government found one reason or the other. So Pakistan could not get the total share of the financial assets that were allocated to government of Pakistan. Another point of dispute here was the division of military. Here the division of manpower was not really a problem, because a formula was evolved, and on the basis of which it was decided about the manpower, whether a particular person would be part of the Indian army or military, or that fellow would be part of the Pakistani army, Pakistani navy, or Pakistani air force. That formula was evolved, and it was not difficult to decide where a person would be going. However, the movement of personnel from one area to another was a problem because of the terrible conditions that existed at that time, and problem of finding transport for shifting individuals or personnel from India to Pakistan or from Pakistani territory to Indian territory. More serious problems arose when the issue of sharing of weapons, equipments, and stores arose. Again, it was not difficult to decide on paper how weapons, equipment, and stores would be distributed. You could do that on paper. But the actual problem was how to transfer Pakistani share to Pakistan. And Pakistan government complained that it could not obtain its due share of military weaponry, equipment, and stores. There were reports at that time that whatever reached Pakistan, a good part of it was broken or damaged. That is, you could not really use it. It was so broken and damaged. In other words, even in case of military division, there were serious operational problems, and that went to the disadvantage of Pakistan, because Pakistan could not get its share of military equipment and stores. One example that I can quote here is that in 47, when Pakistan became independent, Pakistan did not have any ordnance factory. All ordnance factory and all other defense industry in Pakistan, which you see today, was set up after Pakistan became an independent state. This is all post-independence development. Relating to military, the issue was how to reorganize the military, that is, all the three services. Once the manpower has reached Pakistan, how to reorganize them into an effective force. And that took a lot of energy, lot of effort. And like the civil services, in the armed forces, Pakistan retained British officers. In fact, the first commanders of Pakistan Army, Air Force, and Navy were British officers, because Pakistan didn't have senior officers. Same applied to India. India also retained British officers in the three services. But like civil services, Pakistan retained British officers in the armed forces for a longer time than was the case in India. While discussing the division of the military between India and Pakistan, reorganization of the armed forces in Pakistan, we have to keep in mind that while the process of organization was not complete, Pakistan got involved in war in Kashmir, but that we will discuss at a later stage. But this division of asset and Pakistan not getting its due share created problems for Pakistan, and it also created bitterness between independent India and independent Pakistan. Now, we take up the third major issue, integration of the princely states in Pakistan. In the pre-independence period, there were over 560 princely states, some very small, some reasonably large with lot of resources. And when the British rule came to an end, the British advised them either to join India or Pakistan. Most of these states were situated in the territory that became India. So most of them joined India. There were only few states, about 10, which were situated in the territory that became Pakistan. And gradually, these states joined Pakistan. However, the problem arose between India and Pakistan about 3 states. One was the Junagadh state. Junagadh was a small state with a population of 700,000 or 7 lakh, but it had access to sea. And along with Junagadh, there was also another small, very small state, Manavdar, but basically the key state in this connection was Junagadh. Here, the situation was that the ruler was a Muslim, but the majority of population was Hindu. The ruler of state of Junagadh decided to join Pakistan. Pakistan, with some hesitation, accepted this. India was definitely unhappy. India didn't want Junagadh to join Pakistan. Therefore, in November 1947, Indian troops moved in and took over the control of that area, that is Junagadh and Manavdar. And later on, India held a plebiscite there. Since the majority of ordinary population was non-Muslim, the result of referendum was in favor of India. And earlier to this, the ruler of Junagadh, who had opted for Pakistan, had to run from there, and he came to Pakistan in Karachi. Pakistan raised the question of Junagadh and Manavdar at the international level, but nothing came out of it. India was able to integrate state of Junagadh into its union. The other problem arose about the state of Hyderabad. Hyderabad was a reasonably large state, and financially it was a stable and secure state if you compare with other princely states. The ruler of Hyderabad, called Nizam of Hyderabad, was thinking of independence for Hyderabad. He was toying with this idea that it may be an independent state. He was not interested in joining India. But the problem for Hyderabad was that it was surrounded by Indian territory from all sides. All sides there was India, and then you had a princely state which was reluctant, unwilling to join India. What was done initially was that the ruler of Hyderabad, that is Nizam of Hyderabad, signed a standstill agreement with India so that both India and Nizam could consider what to do. In the meanwhile, Indian government built pressure on the ruler of Hyderabad, pressure for joining India. And subsequently, it claimed, that is, India claimed, that a serious law and order situation had emerged in the areas and territory under the control of the ruler of Hyderabad. And in order to deal with this kind of situation, India moved its troops into Hyderabad in September 1948. And in this way, Hyderabad was taken over by the use of military, although India officially describes this as a police action. Hyderabad issue was also raised at the international level, but nothing came out of it, and Hyderabad is now part of India. The third princely states that became a cause of conflict between India and Pakistan is the state of Jammu and Kashmir, a problem that still affects India-Pakistan relations. In case of Kashmir, the story was the opposite of the state of Junagadh. It was a predominantly Muslim state ruled by a Hindu ruler who wanted to be part of India, who was inclined towards India. Although there was a movement going against him before 47, there were Kashmiri groups agitating against the policies of the rulers, and that was long before British decided to quit India. Once independence came, naturally a large section of the Muslim population in Kashmir wanted to go for Pakistan. The ruler was inclined towards India, and Mountbatten, who had become the first Governor General of India, was also advising the ruler of Kashmir to opt for India. In the meanwhile, a revolt developed against the policies of the ruler of Kashmir in the Punch area, and that challenged the authority of the ruler. Subsequently, tribesmen from Pakistani side or tribal areas also joined the struggle. By the third week of October, situation was such that the Maharaja felt threatened that his rule could crumble under the pressure by this uprising that had developed in Kashmir. He sought Indian support. The Governor General Mountbatten and the Indian government insisted on accession. The Maharaja agreed to sign accession as demanded by India, and Indian troops simultaneously entered and took over Srinagar and other areas. While accepting the instrument of accession, which is a questionable instrument, but nevertheless, while accepting that instrument of accession, India agreed that the final settlement of the future of Kashmir will be done with reference to the people of Kashmir. That's the commitment which India gave at the time of acceptance of accession. Subsequently, India took the case to the Security Council, and Security Council passed resolution for deciding the future of Kashmir through a plebiscite, fair and free plebiscite. And initially, India agreed to hold a plebiscite. India agreed to honor the resolutions of the Security Council. But subsequently, India changed its policy and its mind on the issue of referendum in Kashmir. So from that time onward, this issue, Kashmir issue, is there as the major problem and major dispute which threatens peace and stability in the region. And you could trace the origin of this dispute to this process, that is the process of integration of princely states to India and Pakistan. After discussing this issue of princely states, and especially the origin of the Kashmir issue, let's take up another serious problem that Pakistan faced in 1947 and 48. That was the problem of communal rights at the time of independence, killing of Muslims and non-Muslims at the time of independence, and then the problem of refugees. Communal rights did take place in India earlier, from time to time. For example, in 1946, when the Muslim League decided to go for direct action day on 16th August 1946 to explain its position on the cabinet mission plan, there were riots and killings in Bengal, especially in the capital, Calcutta. Now in 1947, once it was decided that Punjab would be partitioned, tension increased between Muslims and non-Muslims, and by the time India and Pakistan became independent on 14th and 15th of August, killings of innocent people had started. Thousands and thousands of people were killed because the others were attacking. Some of this killing was to force people to leave their home and go over to the other side. For example, there were very serious killings in East Punjab. There were problems in other areas also. And the result was that Muslims were migrating from India to the Pakistani area. You also had communal riots. When people, non-Muslims, were moving or migrating from the Pakistani territory to the Indian territory. At that time, situation was terrible in the border areas, that is, in the districts adjoining the new border or the new boundary that had been created between India and Pakistan. People were moving both ways, that is, from Pakistani territory to Indian territory, from Indian territory to Pakistani territory, in most terrible conditions. Some were going on foot, some were using their carts or any other transport, whatever could be available, and some were moving in trains because train system existed. And these people who were moving either from one side to the other or from the other side to the Pakistani side were often attacked by organized gangs who killed people and raped women. So in this way, there was a lot of killing going on at the time of partition. The pressure on Pakistan was greater because the Muslims were facing more problems. However, both Muslims and non-Muslims were killed in 1947. The attendant problem was the refugee problem. Because as killings were going on, people were shifting from one part to the other part. And they were going to the other side by leaving everything they had, their homes, their belongings. Most of these things were left in their place where they were living, and they were going over to the other side. In case of Pakistan, the government of Pakistan, especially the provincial government in Punjab, took the responsibility of looking after these refugees. Refugees were also coming to other provinces. Refugees were going from West Bengal to East Bengal. Refugees were going to Sindh, to Northwest Frontier Province, and some were even ultimately going over to Balochistan. In the initial stages, the management of refugee camps where they were initially coming was given to civil administration along with the military. Military was brought in for providing security to the refugees coming in or refugees going over to India. And the military was also involved in managing the refugee camps. In fact, those people who were able to cross over and reach Pakistan and reach to these camps were lucky people, because thousands couldn't make it. And here the army, the air force, the navy and the civil administration worked together to provide relief to the extent it was possible under those difficult conditions and under those difficult situations. The settlement of refugee issue remained with the government for at least another decade. When these refugees were gradually settled, it took over a decade to settle those refugees. In those difficult times of early years of independence, one positive and redeeming feature was that local population in Pakistan, the people who were already living in those areas that became Pakistan, was very forthcoming, very cooperative, very helpful to refugees, to the people who were migrating from India to Pakistan. The local population was very helpful and accommodating. In fact, that helped to ease pressure on the government, because in addition to government of Pakistan or the provincial governments, the ordinary people, the local population was equally cooperative in helping the refugees, in accommodating the refugees, in providing relief to the people coming here. So in this way, the official and the non-official circles worked together to deal with this serious problem, which Pakistan faced in 1947 and 48. And this problem went on for years. Now, we will focus on another problem that Pakistan faced in the early years of independence. That is the problem of canal water and related issues. This region was partitioned at the time of independence. The major rivers of Pakistan were flowing either from Kashmir, which was the situation in case of the three major rivers, or were coming from India. And in some cases, the canals were also coming from India, whose head was on the Indian side. This gave an important leverage to India over Pakistan. And in 1948, it stopped the flow of water in some canals which were coming from India to Pakistan. And subsequently, India threatened to divert the river water, which meant that if India succeeds in that, agriculture in what was then West Pakistan would be undermined, because for agriculture purposes, Pakistan depended on river and canal water. So in 1948 and subsequently, this issue was a point of contention between India and Pakistan. And this problem lasted until 1960. In 1960, with the intervention of the World Bank, India and Pakistan signed an agreement called the Indus Basin Treaty or Indus Waters Treaty of September 1960. This treaty provides for a formula for sharing rivers and their water. It gives the right over 3 rivers to Pakistan, and the agreement also talked about building new canal system in Pakistan. But the discussion of Indus Basin Agreement is not part of our study, therefore we will not go into that. The only point here is that because of water issue, the relations were badly affected in the early years, and Indus Water Treaty temporarily saved the situation. Another important issue of that period related to trade and economy. There was a lot of trade in the initial stages because the economy of British India was integrated, and the territories that became Pakistan were less industrially developed. Territories that became India were more developed. So the trade was going on. However, the Indian government decided to devalue its currency in 1949. Pakistan did not do that. India didn't like the decision. It stopped trade with Pakistan. The stoppage of trade was a major setback and problem for Pakistan. And this adversely affected the situation at a time when Pakistan really needed support. And it was subsequently that the negotiations took place and situation was taken care of. We have discussed some of the important issues and problems Pakistan had to deal with in the initial stages. It doesn't mean that these were the only problem Pakistan had to deal with, but these were some of the important problems, the problems that not only affected the situation at that time, but some of these problems had profound impact on later developments, especially on relations between India and Pakistan. We will conclude the discussion by saying that Pakistan had to face very difficult situation in the beginning. However, with dedication and commitment and hard work, the leaders of Pakistan at that time were able to cope with the situation and proved that despite difficulties, they had the will to stand on their feet. Khuda Hafiz, until we meet again.